The summer sun scorched the asphalt of Fort Bragg, a relentless glare that made the air shimmer like molten metal. Private Jenna Cross moved silently among her unit, her boots clicking softly against the ground. She kept her head down, her posture impeccable, her uniform crisp despite the humidity that stuck to her skin. She had always been quiet, not timid, not afraid, just deliberately unremarkable. That was her armor. Jenna had joined the army straight out of high school. Back then, everyone thought she'd be another face lost in the rotation of recruits, another quiet soldier who would fade into the background. She had no illusions about the brutality of military life. She had grown up watching her father, a retired sergeant major, slam through every obstacle with iron discipline. She knew the rules: stay sharp, follow orders, never draw attention. And for years it had worked. But today, everything was different. Rumors had begun circulating in the barracks after the night drills. Something about a mistake, minor, inconsequential, but magnified by the gossiping mouths of her colleagues. Jenna didn't even know what they were whispering. She only knew that she could feel the eyes on her now, tracking her every move like predators circling a wounded deer. She quickened her pace, gripping the strap of her pack, telling herself it didn't matter. She told herself she was used to this. By the time she reached the yard, she realized they had been waiting for her. A group of soldiers lounged lazily against the edge of the training field, their smirks sharp in the blazing sun. The tallest of them, Sergeant Wallace, stepped forward with a cruel grin. "Hey, quiet girl," he said, his voice low and dripping mockery. "Looks like someone forgot their place last night." Jenna's stomach tightened. She didn't answer. She had learned early that words could be weapons, and sometimes silence was the deadliest shield. Before she could move, hands grabbed her arms. Her protests were weak against their combined strength. They dragged her across the hot asphalt, past the rows of standing soldiers who either looked away or laughed quietly at the spectacle. Every step made her stomach churn, a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. She had trained her body to endure physical pain, but humiliation, that was a different beast entirely. The soldiers tied her to a weathered wooden pole in the center of the yard. The ropes bit into her wrists, leaving angry red marks. Sweat ran down her temples, mixing with the dirt on her face. She looked around, her eyes scanning for someone, anyone, who might stop this madness. But the yard was empty, or at least it appeared so. "They say you messed up last night," another soldier sneered, his shadow falling over her. "Guess we'll see if you can handle the sun as well as the drill." Jenna clenched her jaw, forcing herself to remain silent. She could feel the anger building inside her, a hot, coiling fire that begged to be released. She had never wanted to be noticed, but suddenly she longed for a rescuer, a witness, anyone who could cut through the laughter and the jeers. Minutes stretched like hours. The soldiers circled her, their jokes growing louder, their punches at her pride sharper. She could feel every eye on her, not with respect but with a perverse curiosity, a fascination with her discomfort. Every laugh was a hammer pounding against her composure, every smirk a knife slicing into her self-respect. Then something changed. From the edge of the yard, a shadow emerged, tall and commanding. Jenna's heart skipped. Her chest tightened, not with fear but with a strange surge of hope she hadn't felt in years. The soldiers noticed it too, their laughter faltering, their casual arrogance wavering. A low, crisp voice cut through the oppressive heat. "What the hell is going on here?" Heads snapped toward the sound. The shadow had become a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with the unmistakable presence of someone who commanded authority effortlessly. His fatigues were perfect, his posture immaculate, and his eyes, hidden behind reflective sunglasses, scanned the scene with laser precision. Jenna froze. The soldiers faltered, unsure how to react. Even seasoned men like Sergeant Wallace seemed to shrink under the weight of his gaze. The man stepped closer, his boots crunching against the gravel with deliberate cadence. Jenna's throat was dry, her wrists aching from the ropes, but something about his presence steadied her, anchored her in a strange mix of fear and awe. "Untie her," the man commanded, his voice low, controlled, leaving no room for argument. The soldiers hesitated. For a second, it seemed as if the sun itself had stopped, as if time had been suspended by the authority that radiated from this stranger. "Now," he said, sharper this time, and the hesitation broke. One by one, they moved to release her, hands fumbling with the ropes. The man, Jenna now realized with mounting disbelief, moved faster, more precise, untying her himself. His movements were swift, efficient, almost surgical. She rubbed her raw wrists as she stumbled backward, trying to process the suddenness of her release. "Are you blind?" one soldier muttered under his breath, but no one dared speak louder. Jenna swallowed hard. She had trained for combat, for strategy, for chaos, but she had never imagined being tied to a pole like an animal in the sun, humiliated in front of her peers. And now, the one person who seemed capable of stopping it had appeared as if out of nowhere. The man's eyes swept the yard, landing briefly on each soldier, then returning to Jenna. There was something in his gaze, a recognition, not just of her presence but of her potential, something that made her heart pound in a way she didn't expect. "Are you okay?" His voice was calm, measured, yet carried an edge that brooked no nonsense. Jenna nodded, though the tremor in her hands betrayed her. She didn't trust herself to speak yet. The soldiers, meanwhile, had shifted uneasily, their bravado eroded. No one laughed now. The air was thick with tension, charged with the silent question: who was this man, and why had he chosen this exact moment to appear? Jenna realized something chilling. This wasn't just intervention. This was a warning. Whoever he was, he had seen her, truly seen her, in a way that no one else had. And that realization filled her with a mixture of fear and something else, something like destiny, raw and unyielding. She took a shaky breath, trying to ground herself in the heat and dust and sweat. She had survived countless drills, endless ridicule, and now, this moment. But she knew instinctively that this encounter was only the beginning. Something had shifted, and she could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest. As the man turned and walked away, the soldiers slunk back, muttering apologies that sounded hollow even to their own ears. Jenna watched him go, heart hammering, her mind racing with questions she didn't yet have answers to. Who was he? Why had he appeared now? And most importantly, what did he want with her? The sun blazed overhead, unforgiving and relentless, but Jenna no longer felt invisible. Something had changed. The quiet soldier had been noticed, and for the first time she wondered if her silence was about to become her greatest weapon. Suspense. A shadow had appeared, a powerful authority had intervened, and Jenna knew deep in her bones that her life, the quiet life she had clung to for so long, was about to change forever. The heat of the yard hadn't diminished. The sun still baked the earth and shimmered against the chain-link fences surrounding Fort Bragg. But Jenna Cross no longer felt it. Her wrists stung from the ropes, her uniform clung to her skin, yet something far heavier pressed on her chest, the sudden, almost surreal shock of being rescued. The soldiers who had tormented her were now shrinking back, unease written in every twitch and glance. The man who had appeared, tall, sharp, and terrifyingly calm, now stood before her. His sunglasses reflected the harsh sunlight, hiding his eyes but amplifying the authority he radiated. He exuded a presence that seemed to bend the yard into a vacuum where all arrogance and bravado were swallowed. Jenna's mind raced. Who was he? Why had he intervened? She had spent years learning to blend into the background, to avoid attention at all costs, and now someone had noticed. "Are you hurt?" he asked again, his voice low but commanding. "No, I'm fine," Jenna managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The words sounded hollow even to her. She wasn't fine. Her body ached from the ropes, but worse was the sting of humiliation, the sudden flood of vulnerability. "Sit," the man commanded, gesturing to a patch of shade beside a solitary oak. She obeyed without question, her heart still hammering. The soldiers lingered, murmuring to each other, unsure if they should flee or answer. Sergeant Wallace, the instigator, swallowed hard and muttered, "Sir, it wasn't that." Silence. The word was sharp, cutting through the chatter like a blade. Wallace flinched. Even now he could feel the weight of authority pressing down, heavier than any corporal's reprimand he had ever received. The man, the stranger, the authority figure, was clearly not someone ordinary. Jenna watched him carefully, trying to read the lines of his face beneath the mirrored lenses. There was a coldness, yes, but beneath it, she sensed calculation, intelligence, and something far deeper, an understanding of people, of situations, and perhaps of her. "You've been quiet," he said finally, as if speaking aloud a thought Jenna had never shared. "Observing, calculating, surviving." She stiffened. He was right. She had spent years hiding, watching, learning. She had trained her mind to anticipate danger, to calculate every step before it happened. But no one had ever recognized it before, not like this. The yard fell silent again. Even the soldiers who had tied her to the pole seemed to shrink under his gaze. He walked slowly around her, boots crunching on the gravel, each step deliberate, as if measuring the yard, measuring her. "You're better than you realize," he said finally, stopping in front of her. "And they're worse than you think." Jenna blinked, trying to process the weight of his words. Her mind raced. How could he know? How could someone understand what she felt, the humiliation, the frustration, the quiet fury that had always simmered beneath her composed exterior? Then unexpectedly he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've been watching you for some time, Jenna. Quiet, unnoticed, observant. You're ready for something most people couldn't handle." Her stomach dropped. Ready for what? He straightened, his shadow stretching across her like a warning. "A mission, high risk, critical. If you accept, it could change everything, not just for you, but for everyone you protect." Jenna's chest tightened. She had never been called ready for anything. She had trained, yes, but the idea of a mission, something real, something dangerous, it was terrifying and thrilling. Her pulse raced, a mix of fear and adrenaline. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. I'm not important, I'm not." "Stop," he said sharply. His tone cut through her self-doubt like steel. "You're more important than anyone in this yard. And right now, you're the only one who can see what they can't, who can act when everyone else hesitates." The soldiers had retreated to the edges of the yard now, whispering among themselves. Jenna could feel their eyes on her again, but this time it was different. They weren't laughing. There was fear there, respect, maybe even awe. She realized that the man, the stranger, the Delta Force general, as she had now overheard whispered among the ranks, had shifted the balance of power in a way she hadn't imagined possible. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "Why me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he surveyed the yard again, as if scanning for unseen threats. Then he turned back to her, sunglasses reflecting the blinding sun, and spoke. "Because you notice things no one else does. You survive things no one else would. And because sometimes the quietest soldier sees the deadliest threat first." A chill ran down Jenna's spine. The words weren't just praise. They were a warning, a promise, and a challenge all at once. Her quiet life, her carefully constructed invisibility, was about to end. The general gestured to a nearby bench, and they both sat. He pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages filled with details, sketches, and notes she couldn't begin to decipher. "There's a terror cell operating in a remote location," he said. "Intelligence is sparse. Most of the army sees it as another drill, another hypothetical, but it's real. Lives are at stake, and I need someone who sees the gaps, who notices anomalies, someone like you." Jenna's stomach tightened. She had trained for drills, for simulations, for endless hours of strategy. But this was real. People's lives were at stake, and she would be in the middle of it. Her mind raced. Could she do it? Was she ready? Years of being ignored, being overlooked, had trained her for silence, for patience, for observation. But had they prepared her for life-and-death decisions in a real mission? Before she could answer, the general stood, closing the notebook with a snap that echoed like a gunshot in the stillness of the yard. "Think about it," he said, voice low but sharp. "Opportunities like this don't come twice, and once you step into this, there's no turning back." He walked toward the fence line, hands clasped behind his back. Jenna watched him, heart hammering as he disappeared from sight, leaving her standing in the sun, ropes now long gone, but the invisible bonds of destiny tightening around her. The soldiers lingered, unsure what to do. Sergeant Wallace finally muttered something under his breath, but it was drowned out by the wind. For the first time, Jenna didn't care what they thought. Their laughter, their ridicule, it no longer mattered. Something had changed. She had been noticed. And for the first time, she felt the strange, terrifying thrill of possibility. Her pulse slowed, but the tension remained, coiling in her stomach like a spring. Someone had intervened. Someone had recognized her. And now she was being called to step into a world she didn't yet understand. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. The soldiers had gone back to their routines, whispers of shame and fear trailing behind them. But Jenna stayed rooted in the center, staring at the empty space where the general had disappeared. She could feel it. The air was thick with anticipation, with danger, with the unknown. Her quiet life, the one she had clung to like a lifeline, had ended. And standing there, in the heat, in the dust, in the lingering shadows of ridicule and humiliation, she realized one thing with absolute certainty. She was no longer invisible. Someone was watching. Someone powerful. Someone who expected everything from her, and would settle for nothing less than excellence. And as the last rays of sunlight cut across the yard, Jenna Cross felt a shiver of anticipation. The quiet soldier was about to step into the storm. Suspense. Who was this Delta Force general, and what did he truly want from her? Was she ready to face the dangers that awaited? And what would happen if she failed? The sun was sinking behind the horizon, painting the Fort Bragg sky in streaks of gold and crimson, but the air in the yard still felt heavy, saturated with the heat of the day and the tension of what had just unfolded. Jenna Cross wiped the sweat from her brow, trying to ignore the ache in her wrists, the lingering sting from the ropes, and the incredulity of the moment. She had survived humiliation before, but never like this. Never with someone so powerful standing between her and her tormentors. The general, as Jenna now knew him, approached again, his boots striking the gravel with an unnerving precision. He had that kind of presence that made people either freeze or follow instinctively. He didn't speak at first, just observed her slow, deliberate weighing, calculating. And as his eyes, hidden behind reflective sunglasses, locked onto hers, Jenna felt as if he could see straight through the fabric of her life, into the quiet, strategic mind she had spent years concealing. "Jenna," he said finally, his voice low but commanding, slicing through the murmurs of the remaining soldiers. "You've been underestimated your whole career, and until today, you've let them do it." Jenna swallowed hard. The words weren't a reprimand. They weren't encouragement either. They were recognition, and weighty recognition at that. She had always hidden in plain sight, observed, learned, and avoided attention. Now, that quiet skill had drawn the notice of a man whose reputation alone could make even the bravest soldiers tremble. "You don't know what you're asking," she said softly. I'm just a private." "Exactly," he said, stepping closer. "And that's what makes you perfect for what comes next. Privates don't have the ego, the blind confidence, or the arrogance that blinds most soldiers. Privates watch, analyze, adapt. And today you proved you have those instincts. You survived humiliation, intimidation, and a display of power from those around you. And you stayed intact." Jenna blinked, the magnitude of his words sinking in. She had never been praised for anything not like this, not for being strategic, quiet, observant. It was a revelation that left her unsteady. He paused, scanning the yard. The soldiers had returned to their barracks, whispers trailing behind them like shadows. Only the distant clang of training equipment broke the silence. Then, without warning, The general leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper that seemed to carry across the still, humid air. I need someone who sees the details others miss, who notices patterns, anomalies, threats before they materialize, and I need that person alive. Jenna's stomach tightened. The weight of his words hit her like a physical blow. She had always understood danger academically, drills, exercises, simulations, but now it was real, personal, and terrifyingly close. "What kind of mission?" she asked cautiously. Her voice was steady, though her pulse raced. He straightened, packing slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "A terror cell, remote location, intelligence is sparse. The people involved are organized, deadly, and unpredictable. Most officers would treat it as a hypothetical scenario, a drill, but I know better. Lives are at stake, and ordinary soldiers wouldn't survive a mission like this. But someone observant, someone precise, could make the difference between life and death. You." The words echoed in her mind. Jenna had trained for high-pressure scenarios, yes, but this was different. This was not simulation. This was not a controlled exercise with instructors ready to intervene if things went wrong. This was raw, real, and deadly, and she was being asked, chosen, to step into it. She hesitated, doubting herself. I don't know if I can." "Stop doubting," he interrupted sharply, his voice cutting like a blade. "If you hesitate, people die, not in simulations, real life, real consequences, and if you fail, there's no reset button. This is why you're being tested even now. You survived being tied to that pole. That's not weakness, Jenna, that's resilience, that's awareness, and those qualities will save lives." Jenna's throat tightened. Every memory of the afternoon flashed before her eyes, the ropes biting her wrists, the laughter, the humiliation, the fear. And now, layered atop it all, was an entirely new understanding. She was being noticed, evaluated, and trusted with responsibility she had never imagined. He stopped packing, standing directly in front of her now. The sun glinted off the lenses of his sunglasses, hiding his eyes but amplifying the intensity of his gaze. "You can walk away now," he said. "You can pretend this never happened, go back to being invisible, letting people underestimate you. But if you do, remember this. The same people who humiliated you today, the same forces who laugh at weakness, will be waiting to exploit it tomorrow. You have a choice. Stand still or step forward and make a difference." Jenna felt her chest tighten. The weight of the choice pressed down on her like a physical force. She had spent years trying to avoid attention, trying to survive, trying to prove nothing. And now, someone was asking her to risk everything, to become visible in a way she had never wanted, to step into danger that could kill her. Her mind raced. Could she do it? Was she ready? Could a private, quiet, overlooked soldier really make a difference in a mission this deadly? Before she could answer, the general reached into his pocket and produced a folder. He handed it to her with a steady hand. The cover was unmarked, the pages filled with maps, photographs, and intelligence briefings, details she barely understood, but that hinted at a complexity and danger beyond anything she had encountered. "Study this," he said. "Know it, memorize it, understand it. You'll be part of a small team, the only one who can see the gaps others can't. You'll observe, analyze, and act. The success of this mission depends on you as much as anyone else." Jenna took the folder with trembling hands, her pulse racing. Every page seemed to vibrate with tension, every map and note a reminder that her life, and the lives of others, were now directly in her hands. The general's gaze softened just a fraction, enough that she could sense a hint of respect buried beneath the layers of discipline and authority. "You have more potential than you realize, Jenna. Don't waste it. People underestimate quiet soldiers all the time, but quiet soldiers see more. They survive longer, they act smarter, they save lives." Jenna swallowed, nodding slowly. She felt the surge of adrenaline mix with fear, excitement, and the faint spark of determination. She had been invisible for too long. She had survived being underestimated, overlooked, and humiliated. Now she had the chance, perhaps the only chance, to prove herself, to step into a role that demanded everything she had learned, everything she had endured. As she closed the folder and tucked it under her arm, the general turned and walked toward the shadows at the edge of the yard. "Rest tonight," he said without looking back. "Tomorrow we move. You'll see firsthand why I chose you. And remember this, every observation, every detail, every second counts. One mistake and lives are lost, including yours." The words hung in the air, a chilling reminder that the quiet life she had clung to was over. Her heart pounded, her mind raced, and a shiver ran down her spine. She was terrified and exhilarated. The invisible, unnoticed soldier was about to step into the eye of a storm she could barely comprehend. The sun dipped fully below the horizon now, leaving long shadows stretching across the yard. Jenna stood alone, the folder heavy in her hands, the weight of the upcoming mission pressing down on her. She could feel it in her bones. She was being watched, evaluated, and tested. The general's gaze, though now absent, lingered in her mind, a constant reminder that she was no longer just another private. She was noticed, she was needed, and she was about to face danger in its most raw, unfiltered form. A sudden breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it a whisper of uncertainty. The mission was coming, and Jenna Cross, the quiet soldier who had survived humiliation in the heat of the sun, was about to be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. Suspense. What would the mission entail? Could Jenna survive the dangers ahead? And what secrets would the Delta Force general reveal next? Secrets that could change everything she thought she knew about her career, her life, and herself. The barracks were quiet that evening, but Jenna Cross could not rest. Her body ached from the ropes and the sun, her uniform still clinging to her like a second skin. Yet it was not physical exhaustion that kept her awake. Her mind raced, spinning with images of the Delta Force general, the yard, the soldiers who had tied her to a pole, and the folder that now rested heavily on her bunk. She opened it again, flipping through the pages carefully. Maps of remote terrain, grainy photographs of men and women in shadowed rooms, notes in cryptic shorthand she could barely decipher, lines connected in patterns she was supposed to interpret. Every detail mattered, every error could be fatal. The realization pressed down on her like a vice. Jenna had trained for drills, simulations, and exercises that pushed soldiers to their limits. But this was different. This was real. Real people were at risk. Real bullets could kill. And the general had chosen her, of all the soldiers she had trained with, of all the men and women on the base, to notice what others could not, to act where others would hesitate. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the barracks messenger system, but she ignored it. Nothing else mattered. She spread the folder across the small wooden desk in the corner of her room, staring at the maps under the harsh fluorescent light. Lines crisscrossed in seemingly meaningless patterns until she noticed them, subtle variations in terrain, anomalies in patrol routes, a faint but consistent gap in security that no one else seemed to see. Jenna exhaled slowly. This was her strength, observation. Quiet, detailed, patient observation. She had survived so long because she noticed what others overlooked, and now, she realized, she was about to use that skill in a life-or-death scenario. A knock at the door startled her. She jumped, clutching the folder to her chest. "Who is it?" she called. The door opened slowly. A young officer, Lieutenant Ramirez, stepped in, his face grim but professional. "Private Cross, the general requested your presence. Now." Jenna's stomach dropped. She had not been expecting this. She had assumed she would have time to prepare, to study, to gather herself. But the mission was moving faster than she anticipated, faster than she was ready for. She nodded and followed him down the corridor, her boots echoing in the empty hall. The general was waiting in a small operations room at the edge of the base. The walls were lined with screens, maps, and monitors. A faint hum of computers and machinery filled the room, a technological heartbeat that underscored the gravity of the moment. "Sit," he said, motioning to a metal chair at the center of the room. Jenna obeyed. She felt exposed, small, but also unusually focused. Every fiber of her being was alert, waiting, calculating. He handed her another folder, thicker and heavier than the last. "This is your mission briefing. Read it carefully. Every detail matters. Memorize the patterns, understand the terrain, anticipate the threats. The enemy is clever. They will exploit mistakes. They will strike first if they sense weakness." Jenna opened the folder. Her eyes widened at the complexity. There were detailed schematics of buildings, patrol schedules, security protocols, and coded intelligence reports. Every page was a puzzle. Every line was a potential clue. She could feel her pulse quicken as the weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. "You will not be alone," the general continued. "A small team will accompany you, but your role is unique. You see what others cannot. You act when others hesitate. And if you fail," his voice dropped, heavy with implication, "the consequences are catastrophic." Jenna's stomach twisted. She had trained to follow orders, to obey, to execute strategies. But this was different. She was not only following orders, she was being asked to think, to anticipate, to make decisions in the moment that could mean life or death. Her mind raced. Could she do it? Could she step beyond the invisible walls she had built around herself and embrace this dangerous, unpredictable responsibility? The general leaned closer, his eyes finally meeting hers, the sunglasses gone, revealing a piercing gaze that seemed to look straight into her mind. "You have everything you need. Don't underestimate yourself. You survived being tied to a pole today. That was a test and you passed. This mission will be harder, but I believe you can handle it." Jenna swallowed, nodding slowly. Her confidence wavered, but beneath it a spark of determination ignited. She had spent her life surviving, observing, and waiting. Now she had a chance to act, to step into a role that mattered. Hours passed as the general outlined the mission. She memorized patrol patterns, terrain anomalies, and security gaps. She asked questions, precise, pointed, necessary, and was met with answers that hinted at danger, betrayal, and high stakes. Every piece of information was a thread, and she knew that if she misinterpreted even one, the consequences could be deadly. As night fell over the base, Jenna stepped outside for a moment, the cool evening air a sharp contrast to the stifling intensity of the operations room. She looked up at the stars, letting her mind wander. Memories of the yard earlier that day flashed before her eyes. The laughter, the ropes, the humiliation. And beneath it all, the moment of rescue, the appearance of the general, the undeniable weight of expectation. She realized then that she had been underestimated her entire life. But now, she had the chance to prove herself, not just to others, but to herself. The quiet soldier, the one who had always watched, waited, and survived, was about to step into a mission that demanded everything she had learned and more. A sudden sound behind her made her jump. She spun, heart hammering, to see Lieutenant Ramirez standing a few feet away. "We leave in 2 hours," he said, his tone clipped but urgent. "The team is ready. The helicopter will be on the tarmac." Jenna nodded, taking a deep breath. There was no turning back now. The mission was imminent. She returned to her bunk, checking her gear again, reviewing the maps and intelligence once more. Every detail mattered. Every mistake could be fatal. Sleep was impossible. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every detail, every potential scenario, every unknown variable. And as the hours dragged on, a single thought crystallized in her mind. She had survived humiliation, she had been noticed, and now she had been chosen. For the first time, Jenna felt the weight of possibility and the gravity of danger pressing down on her. She was ready, but she had never faced anything like this. And deep in her chest, a cold, undeniable thrill began to grow. The mission was coming. The stakes were life and death. And Jenna Cross, the quiet soldier, was about to step into a storm that would test every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage she had. As the first light of dawn touched the base, Jenna rose, packed her gear, and moved toward the helicopter waiting on the tarmac. Her heart raced, her hands shook slightly, but her mind was sharp, focused, and aware. The general was already there, reviewing final details with the team. He glanced at her, a small, almost imperceptible nod acknowledging her presence. She returned the nod, feeling a strange mixture of fear, determination, and exhilaration. She stepped aboard the helicopter, the roar of the blades filling her ears, drowning out everything else. The base disappeared beneath them, replaced by the open sky and the unknown dangers that awaited. Jenna closed her eyes for a moment, letting the vibrations of the helicopter settle into her bones. She thought of the yard, the ropes, the laughter. She thought of the general, his gaze, his words. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she could not fail. The world outside the helicopter was vast, dark, and unforgiving. The mission ahead was dangerous, unpredictable, and possibly deadly. But Jenna Cross, the quiet soldier who had survived everything, was ready to step into it. Suspense, the helicopter roared toward the unknown. Who would they encounter? Could Jenna survive the dangers ahead? And what secrets would the Delta Force general reveal once they reached the target? The roar of the helicopter blades was deafening, shaking Jenna Cross to her core. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her seat, muscles taut, heart pounding in rhythm with the mechanical hum. Through the windows, the landscape of North Carolina blurred into a haze of forests and rolling hills, then gave way to the vast, shadowed terrain of a remote compound, the target of their mission. Jenna had memorized every map, every patrol route, every possible weak point. Yet seeing it laid out beneath her in real life made it terrifyingly different. Lines and symbols on paper suddenly took on deadly weight. Walls that could conceal snipers, fences that could shock, patrols that moved like shadows. Every detail she had studied seemed insignificant against the looming presence of reality. The general sat across from her, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak much, his eyes scanned constantly, observing the team, the terrain, and her. Jenna felt the weight of his gaze as a silent pressure, a reminder that she was expected to notice what no one else could. She could feel it in her spine, a steady hum of anticipation mixed with fear. The helicopter banked sharply and Jenna's stomach lurched. Below, the compound spread like a spiderweb of buildings and paths, hidden partially by dense tree lines. She could see patrols, the flicker of lights in windows, the faint glint of security cameras. Every second of hesitation could cost lives. The team of operatives moved with practiced precision as they disembarked. Jenna's boots crunched against the gravel, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the tense quiet of the compound. They were shadows moving among shadows, silent, efficient, lethal. The general moved beside her, a silent sentinel, his presence commanding and unwavering. "This is where observation becomes survival," he said softly. "Your role is critical. Watch, listen, anticipate, act when the moment demands it, and do not hesitate." Jenna nodded, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. She had trained for this, in theory, countless hours of drills and simulations. But nothing had prepared her for the visceral reality of moving through enemy territory, where the consequences were immediate, unforgiving, and lethal. They advanced along a narrow tree line, hugging shadows, their movements synchronized like a single organism. Jenna's mind raced with calculations, patrol patterns, gaps in coverage, entry points. Every noise of the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of machinery, the snap of a twig underfoot sent adrenaline surging through her veins. Then she heard it, a faint creak almost imperceptible from the side of the compound. Her body tensed. She motioned subtly to the general. He nodded, moving closer to her. "They're inside," he murmured. "Prepare yourself." Jenna's heart hammered. She had imagined scenarios in her mind 1,000 times, but this, seeing the compound, the patrols, the faint movement inside, was entirely different. She realized that every second, every observation, could save lives or doom them. They reached the edge of the compound, crouched behind a low wall. Jenna peered through the shadows, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Inside, she saw figures moving with purpose, armed, alert, dangerous. And then a child, small, frightened, caught in the middle of the chaos. Her stomach twisted. The mission had just become personal. The general signaled for her to follow him closer. "You'll enter through the east perimeter. There's a blind spot where the cameras overlap imperfectly. You notice anomalies. That's your skill. Use it." Jenna swallowed, gripping her gear tighter. She had never felt so acutely the difference between theory and reality. Every instinct screamed caution. Every fiber of her being demanded survival. But she also felt a strange, determined calm. She had survived humiliation. She had been underestimated. And now she was being relied upon to notice what no one else could. They moved again, silent, shadows among shadows. The perimeter was guarded by two armed men, packing slowly, predictable in their patterns. Jenna signaled subtly to the general. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Timing was everything. She counted the seconds, memorized the movements, and then acted. A thrown pebble distracted one guard, making him step slightly out of position. The general and the team moved with deadly precision, neutralizing the threat before it could sound the alarm. Jenna's pulse raced, but she stayed focused, scanning, observing, anticipating the next threat. They entered the compound. The smell of sweat, metal, and something acrid filled the air. Jenna's eyes darted from shadow to shadow, her mind calculating every possible variable. They could be discovered at any moment, and she knew it. The child was still there, hiding behind a crate. Jenna motioned to the general. He signaled a team member to secure the child. But before they could move, a door creaked open. A guard stepped out, gun raised. Jenna froze, calculating the angle, the distance, the timing. She could either react and risk exposure or wait and hope the team neutralized the threat. Her mind raced, analyzing probabilities, anticipating reactions. Then instinct took over. A whispered signal from the general, a flash of movement from the team, and the guard was incapacitated without a sound. Jenna exhaled slowly, her hands shaking. The danger was immediate, visceral, and terrifying, and she had survived the first real test. But the compound was vast. The child's location was precarious. Every corridor, every room, every shadow held a potential threat. Jenna moved with the team, heart pounding, senses sharpened to the edge of panic. They reached the central building. Lights flickered, shadows moved unpredictably. Jenna could feel the weight of her responsibility, the knowledge that any mistake could be fatal. She glanced at the general. He gave a slight nod, a mixture of reassurance and challenge. He trusted her, expected her to act. Jenna's eyes swept the room, memorizing every detail. The position of doors, the shadows, the faint glint of weapons, the sound of breathing. Every second counted. Every observation mattered. And then, unexpectedly, a door burst open, revealing multiple armed figures rushing toward them. Jenna froze for a fraction of a second, calculating possibilities. Then she acted. She moved, directed, signaled, and guided the team through the chaos, her quiet mind processing details that could have killed them all. Gunfire erupted, shouts echoed, and the world narrowed to pure survival. Jenna's instincts, her years of quiet observation, became her greatest weapon. She was no longer invisible. She was a force. Amid the chaos, she caught sight of the child again, terrified, trying to hide. Her heart ached, but she focused, guiding the team to secure the child safely. Every step was tense, every movement critical. By the time the firefight subsided, the immediate danger had passed, but Jenna's heart still raced. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, every muscle taut, every sense heightened. They had survived barely, but the mission was far from over. The general approached her, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said, voice low, calm, but carrying an edge of intensity. "But this is only the beginning. There's more inside, and someone knows we're here. The cell is aware. We need to move fast." Jenna nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. The danger was immediate, personal, and unpredictable, but she had survived the first test. She had acted when others might have hesitated. And as the team prepared to move deeper into the compound, Jenna realized something profound. She was no longer the quiet soldier who stayed in the background. She was a key player in a deadly mission, one misstep from disaster. Suspense. The compound held more dangers than they could see. Who else was watching them? And what would Jenna face next as they moved deeper into the enemy stronghold? The compound smelled of dust, sweat, and something metallic, fear, perhaps, or blood. Jenna crouched low, her boots silent on the cold concrete, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Every muscle in her body screamed vigilance, her heart thundering like a war drum in her chest. The child, small and trembling behind a crate, was now in the hands of one of the Delta Force operatives, but Jenna knew that safety was temporary. In this place, nothing was permanent. The corridors of the compound twisted like a labyrinth. The walls were lined with doors, each one a potential threat. Sounds echoed in strange, unpredictable ways: the scraping of a chair, the distant hum of machinery, the faint murmur of voices in hidden rooms. Jenna's mind raced, mapping every corner, memorizing every detail. Observation had always been her strongest skill, and now it was essential. The general moved silently beside her, eyes scanning, posture rigid, his presence both comforting and terrifying. Jenna felt the weight of his gaze like a constant pressure, a reminder that she was not only expected to survive, but to see what others could not. "Stay sharp," he whispered, barely audible over the faint creak of the floor. "They know we're here. They're waiting." Jenna nodded, clutching her weapon tightly. Her mind replayed every detail from the briefing, every observation she had made in the field. The enemy was clever, organized, and ruthless. Any hesitation could be fatal. A sudden noise, a faint shuffle, almost imperceptible, made her freeze. Her pulse spiked. She crouched lower, signaling to the team. The general moved with her, silent and precise, as they advanced toward a central room where the cell's leadership was believed to be. Inside, they encountered their first direct resistance. Armed guards emerged from shadowed corners, shouting in a language Jenna barely understood. Instinct took over. She ducked, rolled, and fired, each shot calculated to incapacitate without drawing unnecessary attention. Her hands shook, but her aim was steady. The operatives moved as a single unit, their training seamless, but Jenna felt every heartbeat, every potential mistake, every life hanging in the balance. Amid the chaos, she caught sight of the child again. His eyes were wide with terror, and something in Jenna's chest twisted. This was no longer just a mission. This was personal. She had to protect him, to guide him, to ensure he survived. The team cleared the first room, but the compound was far from secure. More guards appeared and gunfire erupted. Jenna's training, her careful observation, became her lifeline. She guided teammates through narrow hallways, signaling silently, predicting enemy movements. Every step was critical. Every decision carried the weight of life and death. Suddenly, a guard lunged at her from a side corridor. Time slowed. Jenna's mind calculated angles, distance, and speed. Her body reacted before she could think. She dodged, countered, and neutralized the threat, heart hammering, hands slick with sweat. Around her, the battle unfolded like a choreographed chaos, but every detail mattered, every second counted. The general was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of precision and calm. He moved through the compound like a shadow, neutralizing threats, issuing commands with minimal words. Jenna followed, learning from his actions, absorbing every detail, pushing herself to match his relentless efficiency. They reached the central office, the nerve center of the compound. Inside, the terror cell leaders were attempting to organize resistance. Weapons were drawn, hands shook, faces twisted in fear and determination. Jenna froze for a moment, scanning the room. Every movement, every expression, every subtle sign of intention was a potential clue. Then the general gestured. It was her moment. Jenna stepped forward, heart racing, and guided the team with silent signals. Her observations had predicted the positions and reactions of the enemy with near-perfect accuracy. Shots were fired, threats neutralized, and in the midst of it all, the child was safe, guided quietly to a corner where one of the operatives shielded him. But just as she exhaled, thinking the immediate danger had passed, she felt a surge of cold panic. One of the leaders, hidden in a shadowed corner, had drawn a concealed weapon. Jenna's pulse spiked. She raised her rifle instinctively, but before she could act, the man fired a shot that ricocheted off the wall, missing her by inches. Time slowed. Adrenaline coursed through her veins like wildfire. Every training exercise, every observation, every late night spent memorizing patterns, it all led to this moment. She ducked, rolled, and returned fire, her body moving on instinct, her mind calculating trajectories, distances, and outcomes faster than she could consciously process. The general was at her side, neutralizing threats with precise efficiency. He barked orders, but the words were secondary. Jenna anticipated them before they were spoken. She moved through the room like a shadow, her quiet, observant nature now a lethal advantage. And then she saw it, a small, faint glimmer of movement behind a stack of crates, another hidden threat. Jenna didn't hesitate. She raised her weapon, aimed, and fired. The figure collapsed silently, neutralized without alerting others. Her chest heaved, sweat dripping down her face, but she felt a surge of controlled adrenaline. She had survived, acted, and protected those in her care. The mission, however, was far from over. The general approached, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Good work," he said, voice low but firm. "You see what others cannot. You act when others hesitate. But remember, there's more. Always more. The mission isn't finished until every threat is neutralized and every life is secure." Jenna nodded, swallowing hard. Fear and exhilaration coiled in her stomach, a strange mixture that left her shaking yet focused. She had been tested in ways she never imagined. The humiliation of earlier that day, the ropes, the laughter, all of it seemed to have prepared her for this moment. She was no longer invisible. She was critical to the success of the operation. The team moved deeper into the compound, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats, and securing hostages. Jenna's observations guided every step. She noticed patterns others missed: a hidden camera, a subtle tripwire, a guard repositioning silently. Each observation saved seconds, lives, and minimized risk. But even as they advanced, Jenna felt a gnawing tension. Someone inside the compound had tipped off the guards. The resistance was smarter, more organized than anticipated. And a creeping thought formed in her mind. What if there was a traitor among them? Someone feeding information to the enemy? Her pulse quickened. The mission was high stakes. Lives were on the line, and now betrayal was a possibility she could not ignore. The general sensed her hesitation. He glanced at her, his expression sharp, unreadable. "Stay focused," he said. "Don't let fear cloud your judgment. Observe, anticipate, act. That's your strength. That's why you're here." Jenna swallowed, forcing herself to concentrate. The corridors of the compound stretched endlessly, shadows hiding unknown dangers, each room a potential death trap. But she was ready. She had survived humiliation, ridicule, and doubt. Now she had the opportunity to prove herself under fire. And as they prepared to breach the next room, Jenna realized something profound. She was no longer just a quiet soldier. She was a critical part of a mission that could decide life or death. Her observations, her instincts, her decisions mattered. Every step, every breath, every action counted. Suspense. The next room could hold more hostiles, more traps, and perhaps the traitor they hadn't yet realized existed. Jenna's skills would be tested to the limit. Could she survive and protect everyone inside? The corridors of the compound twisted like a snake, dark and oppressive. Jenna crouched low, heart hammering, senses straining. Every step echoed against the cold concrete, every shadow seemed alive. She led the team toward the inner chamber, the heart of the terror cell, where the leaders were believed to be holed up. The child, now secure in the hands of a teammate, huddled silently, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. The general moved silently beside her, calm and precise, but Jenna could feel the tension radiating from him. Something had shifted. The resistance inside the compound was smarter, more coordinated than anticipated. Their movements were no longer chaotic. They anticipated the team's strategy, and Jenna's instincts screamed that someone had warned them. She scanned the team, eyes narrowing. Everyone moved with precision, but subtle signs caught her attention. A glance too long, a hesitation, a micro-expression that didn't fit. Her stomach twisted. Could there really be a traitor among them? The general paused, signaling the team to take cover behind a stack of crates. "Stay alert," he murmured. "Something off." Jenna crouched beside him, mind racing. She memorized the layout, the positions of doors, the shadows, every potential angle of attack. Then she noticed it. Lieutenant Ramirez, the officer who had brought her to the mission, was holding his rifle slightly differently, too tense, too deliberate. He was scanning the corridor not with awareness of threats, but as if anticipating movement from inside. Her pulse spiked. She leaned toward the general, whispering, "Sir Ramirez, something's not right." The general's eyes narrowed, and in a split second he assessed the situation. "Cover me," he ordered, moving forward silently, a shadow among shadows. Jenna followed, signaling the team subtly, their awareness heightened to near perfection. Suddenly, the inner door burst open, and a group of armed operatives emerged, not enemies but rogue soldiers from within their own team. The betrayal was immediate, shocking, and brutal. Ramirez had signaled them, and now the team was trapped between two deadly forces. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the confined space. Jenna's heart pounded, adrenaline surging through every vein. She rolled behind a concrete barrier, firing with precision, neutralizing threats before they could act. Her observations were flawless. She anticipated movement, calculated angles, and acted decisively. The general was everywhere at once, taking down rogue soldiers with lethal precision, but Jenna realized that this was the ultimate test. Not just survival, not just the mission, but the ability to see betrayal, anticipate it, and act before it was too late. Ramirez stepped forward, weapon raised, his eyes cold, calculating. "Step aside, Cross," he sneered. "You've done well, but this mission, it's bigger than you, bigger than your loyalty." Jenna's chest tightened. Rage and fear coiled together, sharpening her instincts. She raised her rifle, her voice steady despite the chaos. "No, you're underestimating me. That's your mistake." The room became a deadly chessboard. Every step, every movement, every breath could mean life or death. Jenna calculated positions, angles, and potential outcomes with precision. She fired, disarming a rogue operative attempting to flank her, then ducked behind cover as bullets ricocheted around her. The child whimpered from behind the barrier, but Jenna's focus never wavered. She signaled another teammate to secure him while keeping her sights on Ramirez. This was the moment she had trained for, the culmination of every observation, every silent hour of preparation, every hidden skill honed in obscurity. Ramirez lunged, but Jenna anticipated the movement, sidestepping and using his momentum to disarm him. The general, nearby, neutralized another threat, but the intensity of the betrayal reverberated through Jenna like a physical blow. She had trusted her team. She had believed in their professionalism. Now the mission had become personal. Gunfire echoed through the compound, but the team adapted, using their training and Jenna's observations to regain control. Every shadow was scanned, every door checked, every potential threat neutralized. The rogue operatives were skilled, but the Delta Force team, guided by Jenna's awareness and the general's precision, slowly gained the upper hand. And then, a voice from behind, a grenade rolling across the floor, arcing toward the child. Jenna's heart stopped. Without hesitation, she lunged, throwing herself over the child just as the device detonated. The explosion rattled the compound, sending dust and debris into the air, but both she and the child survived. The general's eyes widened briefly, a flash of respect, then focus returned. "Cross," he shouted. "Secure the perimeter, move." Jenna sprang to her feet, adrenaline sharpening her senses. She led the child and the remaining operatives through a maze of corridors, anticipating movement, blocking ambushes, neutralizing threats. Every step was precise, calculated, lethal. Her quiet strength, honed through years of observation and survival, now defined the mission's success. They reached the inner chamber, the control room of the terror cell. The remaining rogue operatives attempted to regroup, but Jenna's observations had predicted every movement. She coordinated with the general silently, guiding the team to sweep the room, secure hostages, and neutralize the last threats. Finally, after what felt like hours compressed into minutes, the room fell silent. The rogue operatives were subdued, the terror cell's leadership incapacitated, and the hostages, including the child, safe. Jenna collapsed against the wall, chest heaving, sweat and dust covering her. The general approached, hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said, voice low but carrying weight. "Better than expected. You saw what others could not. You acted when others hesitated. You survived betrayal and danger alike. You're no longer invisible, Cross. Today you became indispensable." Jenna swallowed, trying to process the intensity of the past hour. She had faced betrayal, gunfire, explosives, and life-or-death decisions, and she had survived. She had not only survived, she had led, observed, and acted decisively when it mattered most. But even as relief washed over her, a shadow lingered in her mind. Ramirez's betrayal had revealed something unsettling. The mission, the team, the trust she placed in others, it could all be compromised again. And someone somewhere had tipped off the terror cell before they even arrived. Her pulse steadied, but the tension remained. The mission was a success, but the war within shadows, the unseen enemies, was far from over. Jenna realized then that her quiet observation, her ability to notice what others missed, would always be the line between survival and catastrophe. As the Delta Force team prepared to exfiltrate, Jenna glanced at the child, now safe and guarded by operatives. Relief and a strange, fierce protective instinct surged through her. She had faced betrayal, chaos, and death, yet she had emerged not only alive but pivotal to the mission's success. The general approached again, his eyes sharp, unwavering. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow we analyze everything. Today you earned survival, but tomorrow we plan for what comes next, and there will always be a next. Always." Jenna nodded, chest still heaving, mind replaying every second, every observation, every calculated risk. She had been tested, pushed to her limits, and now she knew she could survive. She could lead. She could act when others hesitated, and no one would ever underestimate her again. The compound, silent now except for distant echoes, bore witness to the quiet soldier who had stepped into the storm, survived betrayal, and emerged stronger, sharper, and more aware than ever before. Suspense. Ramirez's betrayal raises questions. Who else can be trusted? What secrets remain hidden in the shadows? And what will the next mission demand of Jenna and the general? The compound lay in ruins, a chaotic testament to the storm that had passed. Smoke curled lazily from shattered windows, debris littered the corridors, and the acrid scent of gunpowder still clung to the walls. Jenna Cross stepped carefully through the remnants, her boots crunching against broken glass and twisted metal. She had survived the impossible, betrayal, gunfire, explosives, and chaos. But the adrenaline that had propelled her through the mission still thrummed in her veins, refusing to dissipate. The child, now clinging to one of the operatives, looked up at her with wide, exhausted eyes. Jenna felt a strange ache in her chest, a mix of relief, protectiveness, and pride. She had kept him safe. That was enough for now. The general appeared at her side, surveying the aftermath with a critical eye. His presence was both grounding and intimidating, a constant reminder of the high stakes they had just endured. "Secure the perimeter," he ordered. "Sweep the area. Make sure there's nothing left that can threaten our exfil. Jenna moved with the team, scanning every shadow, every doorway, every corner. Her mind, honed by years of observation and tested in the crucible of betrayal and combat, worked tirelessly. She noticed subtle signs of movement, a door slightly ajar, footprints in dust, a discarded weapon. Each detail mattered. Each observation could prevent disaster. As the team cleared the final rooms, Jenna felt the weight of the mission settle on her shoulders. They had neutralized the terror cell, rescued hostages, and survived internal betrayal. Yet the stakes were not entirely behind them. Someone within their ranks had betrayed them, and the general's piercing gaze reminded her that vigilance must never waver. Ramirez had been restrained, subdued by operatives after the chaos of his attempted betrayal. He sat in a corner, glaring, defeated, yet dangerous. Jenna met his eyes briefly, a spark of something unspoken passing between them. Anger, disappointment, a silent acknowledgement that trust was fragile and earned, never given. The general spoke, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Cross, you did what I never expected from a private. You observed when others would have panicked. You acted when hesitation would have cost lives. You survived betrayal. You protected the innocent. Today, you proved something important not just to me but to yourself. You are no longer invisible." Jenna swallowed, a lump rising in her throat. She had always hidden in plain sight, unnoticed, underestimated. She had observed, adapted, and survived. But today she had acted, decided, and led. She had been tested under the harshest conditions, and she had not only survived, she had excelled. The team began the exfiltration process. Helicopters hovered above the compound, their rotors slicing through the thick smoke. Jenna secured her gear, checked her weapon, and glanced one last time at the ruined corridors. Each step back toward the aircraft felt surreal, the adrenaline slowly ebbing but leaving a lingering sense of vigilance. The general joined her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This mission is over, but the war never ends. Remember that, Cross. Today you learned what you're capable of. Tomorrow you'll face more challenges. The key is to remain sharp, observant, and ready. Never let anyone underestimate you again." Jenna nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. They were not merely praise, they were a charge, a recognition of potential, a demand for continued excellence. She had survived humiliation, betrayal, and chaos. She had protected lives when failure would have been fatal, and now she understood what it meant to be truly indispensable. As they boarded the helicopter, Jenna took one last look at the compound, now quiet except for the distant wail of alarms being silenced and the faint stirrings of security forces arriving. The child sat quietly beside her, his small hand clutching hers briefly in silent gratitude. Jenna's chest tightened. This mission had been more than a test of skill. It had been a test of humanity, courage, and instinct. The helicopter lifted into the sky, carrying them away from the compound and toward the base. Jenna felt the wind whip against her face, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Every moment of fear, every second of chaos, every silent observation had led to this. She had survived, she had acted, and she had emerged stronger. Below them, the compound shrank into a patchwork of shadows and smoke. Jenna's mind replayed the mission in sharp, vivid detail, every door, every shadow, every act of betrayal, and every life saved. Her quiet nature, her careful observation had made all the difference. The general had seen it. The team had relied on it, and she had delivered. The general broke the silence. "Tomorrow we debrief. Today you rest. But remember this, Cross, you are no longer the same soldier who arrived at this base. You've stepped into a role that demands excellence, courage, and vigilance. Never forget it." Jenna nodded, a sense of calm settling over her for the first time since the mission began. She had been tested, challenged, and transformed. The quiet, overlooked private was gone. In her place stood a soldier who had seen the unseen, acted when it mattered, and survived when others might have faltered. The helicopter touched down at the base, the rotors slowing, the world feeling suddenly normal and yet irrevocably changed. Jenna stepped out, her boots firm on the tarmac, surveying the familiar landscape with new eyes. She had been invisible, underestimated, and overlooked for too long. That was no longer possible. She had proven herself under fire, in chaos, and in the face of betrayal. The general gave her a brief nod of acknowledgement before turning to attend to the rest of the team. Jenna felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, a quiet satisfaction that she had never known before. She had faced fear, betrayal, and life-or-death danger, and she had prevailed. As she walked toward the barracks, Jenna thought of the day that had begun with humiliation, ropes, and laughter at her expense. The path from that moment to now had been unimaginable, yet every observation, every careful calculation, every quiet decision had led her here. She had transformed from a soldier who survived to one who commanded presence, respect, and critical responsibility. Later that evening, alone in her bunk, Jenna opened the folder one last time. She reviewed the mission details, the maps, and the intelligence. Not out of fear, but out of a relentless desire to be prepared, to remain vigilant. She knew the world was full of shadows, betrayal, and unforeseen dangers, and she also knew she was ready to face them. The child they had rescued would return home to safety. The terror cell was dismantled. And yet, Jenna understood this was only the beginning. Missions like this never truly ended. There would always be another threat, another test, another opportunity to act decisively. She closed the folder, a small smile touching her lips. The quiet soldier was gone. In her place was someone who had faced fear, betrayal, and chaos and survived. Someone who had acted when others hesitated. Someone indispensable. The night outside was silent, calm, almost serene, but Jenna knew better. The world was never truly calm. Danger lurked in shadows. Betrayal could strike at any moment, and yet, for the first time, she felt ready. She had survived the impossible. She had protected the innocent. She had faced herself and emerged victorious. The Delta Force general's words echoed in her mind. Never let anyone underestimate you again. Jenna knew she never would. As the moonlight bathed the base in silver, Jenna Cross finally allowed herself a deep breath. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer quiet. She had survived, led, and transformed. And tomorrow she would be ready for whatever came next. Suspense and closure. Jenna's journey ends with triumph, yet the shadow of future danger lingers, leaving audiences both satisfied and hungry for what comes next, the mark of a true cinematic story.